The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere. Watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Friday, April 6th, Saturday, April 7th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond, and this is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you have a good day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, live in the Great White North in the Caribou region on top of the snowy mountains of central British Columbia. 150,000 nightly listen to this show, and we're proud to be broadcasting live on WQEE 99 Rock the Key in Noonan, Georgia, the United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, and you can catch us on The Fringe FM. Yes, we love being at home on The Fringe. Just go to thefringe.com to check us on out. We're also all over social media. You heard Uncle Bob tell you where we are. We're also live on periscope.tv every Monday through Friday, and you can check out our archives. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I would appreciate that. That's where we store all the previous shows. If you head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, you can do a little shopping at the Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, dealing with everything paranormal, strange, and odd. Check out my latest blog there as well. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Or watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. It's going to be a fun ride tonight. Chat rooms are starting to fill up. Everybody's showing up on Periscope tonight. Twitter's starting to line up. The Veterans Club as well. Good to have you all here, all surrounding me. all for a night of fun. And if you can't make it into one of our chat rooms, that is very much okay. I hope you enjoy the ride as we're about to go 3 hours with the man, the myth, and the legend, our Keith Andrews. Yes, it is the first Friday of the month, which means our resident extraterrestrial expert, our Keith Andrews, is here to help break down the experiences you are having when it comes to ET contact, abduction, or just some weird, strange lights going on in the sky. Keith is a lifelong experiencer living in the heart of British Columbia. A former military brat, Keith has been dealing with alien contact since infancy. It's a life he wouldn't wish on his own worst enemy, but the main thing is, he's here to help you out. So if you've had anything you can't explain and want it, do me a favor, call in tonight. 1-702-302-4556. That's 1-702-302-4556. My friend, our Keith Andrews, hard to believe, another start to another month, and you're back again. How you doing?
Not bad at all. I tell you, this year is just quite literally flying by. I don't know how we're going to blink and we're going to be in 2019.
You know what? I was looking at my radio schedule, and I'm already booked up to June 11th. June 11th.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, you think June is so far away. And,
yeah,
and no, it's not. What have you been up to, my friend? How you been doing? Oh, let me turn you on here. Hold on. Let me turn you on. I forgot to turn you on there. That's my fault. Because all of a sudden I'm going to start getting a bunch of messages saying, we can't hear Keith. We can't hear Keith. So we can hear Keith now. Sorry about that. That's my fault. So excited to get this damn show going, man.
Oh, I tell you, things have been hectic as all get out. And between the activity that's been going on, as far as what the BC government, what the Canadian government's been up to regarding, shall we say, finally accepting the fact that, simply put, we're not alone. You couple that with the rest of my life and the writing and what have you that I'm working on. If I get 3 hours of sleep a night, I'm actually doing really well.
What's that like?
I'm still trying to figure out how I pull that one.
I'm not going to lie, I had a nap before the show, my friend. I had a nap before the show. It felt good. I'm pretty happy with it.
I usually try. But the fact of the matter is that, as you well know, trying to find some sort of time to kind of wind down or just put your feet up, with what you've got going on in your end, you don't get any time to sit down, really. I mean, we're on the radio, so yes, we sit down there. But I don't know about you, but in my case, I'm working on deciphering signals that I've been handed, or sorting out different questions that people are emailing me or sending me via Skype, regarding things that are happening on their end. There's, they say there's no rest for the wicked. I'm starting to wonder what I did wrong,
Oh, I haven't had any really good experiences lately. I can't even share anything nice with you. Usually I have something, something to go to with you to kind of kick off the show, but life has been pretty boring lately outside of the SOR studios. Haven't had much. Oh, yes, actually there was. There was, just the other night. I'm glad I figured this out. Don't know what it was, if it was something on my camera or not. But as you know, we also broadcast live on Periscope.tv, and for like the last 45 minutes of my show a couple of nights ago, there was an orb that was traveling back and forth. And literally, I thought it was one of my friends who may be playing a trick on me, because right behind me I have a Canadian flag that covers a window, and the blinds are down on that window. So I thought maybe somebody was, having a flashlight and kind of going across with it, because it seemed to be going at the same direction as the leaf inside the Canadian flag. And I turned and looked. I never saw it. I couldn't see it with my open eye, but we could see it on camera. And then it started actually going in front of my face, which was kind of weird. So I don't know what the hell was causing that, but our listeners saw it, who were watching on Periscope, and it was very, very strange. We were talking, what were we talking that night? Let me look at my schedule. We were talking, that was Monday night, we were talking Civil War ghosts.
Okay.
And all of a sudden this orb just kept on flying around, and thank goodness we had it on camera to check it out.
which is always entertaining. Well, the thing is, especially when you're looking at orbs, there are three different ways or three different causes of them. And the easiest one to overlook, first thing you got to understand, that everybody's got to understand, is when we're talking about seeing something on film as compared to face-to-face, or as compared to seeing it with your open eye, is the magnetic field that they tend to activate. The human eye doesn't tend to register. It sees it, but the brain doesn't actually sort it out. So when you take it to a camera that's got no ability to sort things out, no ability to differentiate between what might or might not be there, this is why they show up on film where you may not physically see them. Now, of course, the most obvious one that many people mistake for an orb, and clearly this was not the case in your situation, is literally dust particles. Okay, anybody that works with photography knows that this is one of the big things that causes complications with photographs. But there's also orbs which are literally, since you were talking about the ghosts of the Civil War at the time, it would not be a surprise, at least not from my standpoint, to find that what you were dealing with was an actual spirit who happened to catch wind of what you were talking about. And since you were the one doing the talking, they came looking for you to ask. They came looking for you to hear what you were saying in order to piece it together. Of course, the third type is literally either probes or actual off-world ships. But in your case, this seems to be pretty black and white about it being a spirit from one of the predeceased.
Yeah, I have no idea. It was a little weird, man. It was a little weird, and, I love when weird and strange things happen, and, you know as well as I do, Keith, it's happened quite a bit during this show. Going back to the days of Carl hanging on out with us, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I think I still look at that going, he couldn't have come at a better time, really. Because as I recall, you were still questioning, you were still at that stage of, I really believe in this phenomenon, I really know it's happening, but, it's so hard to hold on to the belief, and then he shows up. Kind of wiped out the whole issue of was he there?
Yeah, I mean, that was still such, one of the strangest experiences of my life. I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll show up tonight. Let's put out the intention tonight, Keith, with all of our audience, that Carl shows up tonight.
I think that would be priceless, in all fairness.
Yeah, he's got to come to the window, okay? And this isn't, a couple of my neighbors coming over to play tricks. I know what Carl looks like. I'll be able to tell a mask from nothing. But if he comes out there, this is what I'm going to do. If Carl shows up during the show tonight, I'm going to call in myself to Skype so that way I can go outside with you guys. Because I'm not going to be able to turn the camera. My camera is on my computer. It's built in. So I'm not going to be able to all of a sudden turn my laptop and then go with it. But I'm going to go after him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, him and I are going to have a conversation. I better get a flight out of this. That's all I know. I need a flight.
Hey, you really got to be careful what you ask for on things like that. I've had some of the flights these people go on. Not always the most enjoyable side effect. Okay, now,
I'm willing to take that chance. I just want it to happen. I'm willing for the side effects, Keith, because I know Carl's benevolent. Okay,
yes,
so I'm not worried about getting the Whitley Strieber treatment or anything along those lines. I want to be there. I want to check him out. I want to, say, hey, what does this button do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that would be one of the big reasons why they don't let people run around.
Well, I want to give it a try, man. We're gonna come down, pick you up, then we're gonna fly over to North Carolina, pick up the preacher, because I promised him, and then we're going to, I don't know, let's go check out Mars or the moon. I want to see how fast we can get to Mars. I want to see if there's humans on there, if that's just a bunch of BS. Carl owes me a flight. He owes me a flight.
Now, I know this is going to sound like an odd question, but how so? I mean, if you think about it, really. But the issue of the one thing that I will caution you about with any time I've gone on a flight, you got to be aware that potassium crashes are a pain in the neck. It's one of the side effects of going off planet for a while. And anybody that's talked to astronauts, talked to the real people, the humans that have gone off world,
Mm-hmm.
or has done the research into it, potassium crashes are a massive mess for many of them.
Mm-hmm. One of my biggest problems, Keith, is maybe the reason why Carl won't take me on the ship. Maybe my butt is too big. Maybe my butt is too big, and I can't get my ass in that tiny little alien seat, and there's not enough room there. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, you clearly haven't seen some of the people off-world that I've seen. And I am talking about the humans that they've taken.
Well, I don't know what the situation is, but we're going to get into it. So let's start off tonight, because one of the topics that we have never really talked about at all during this show with you is the fact that you and I, both being Canadian, we have a large Canadian contingent for our audience. And up here, up north, we have a lot of people who look to the south for anything that does anything or has to do with anything in the field of ufology. We look at Area 51, we look at Dugway, we look at Dulce, we look at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, Roswell, Kecksburg, you name it. It always seems to come down to what happens in the United States. Yet we don't hear a lot about the experiences here in Canada. And I'm thinking Shag Harbor in 1967, but there is something that has just come out as of April 3rd, which was this past Tuesday, that is extremely weird for the Canadian culture. Now, a lot of people who listen to us, because 70% of our audience is American, a lot of the people who listen to us will be like, well, what's a big deal with this? It's just a coin. So what's happened, if you haven't heard the story, the Canadian Mint has created a special coin. It's in the shape of a guitar pick, and it actually glows in the dark. And this goes back to May 20th, 1967. So we're coming up on the 51st anniversary here, very, very shortly. A gentleman by the name of Stephen Mahalik was hanging out looking for silver objects, just kind of prospecting around Manitoba's Whiteshell Provincial Park. So if you don't know where Manitoba is, it is right in the center of the province. If you go west, you head to Saskatchewan. You can wave at Ron Moniak over there, the Ukrainian watermelon. Or if you go to the right, there's Ontario and Hogtown, where we have quite a few listeners as well. So on that day, Mahalik saw this silver object, your classic flying saucer. And he was standing by a riverbed with a forest in the background, and this saucer came over him. He kind of fell to the ground. He didn't know what to make out of it. All right. And this craft beamed him with a light, burning his skin, burning his clothes. He reported it to the RCMP, and not knowing what had happened. And this story has become one of the biggest fascinating stories in Manitoba and Canadian history. However, because we are not very, historic, shall we say, when it comes to taking on events like this, it was kind of forgotten about, and most Canadians, believe it or not, do not even know this. So the Canadian Mint, out of nowhere, makes this coin. Not of Wayne Gretzky, not of some of our Olympians or Paralympians or famous actors like William Shatner or Michael J. Fox or whoever it may be. All right, no, a UFO incident. And when the coin is in the dark, it goes black. The spaceship gets a pink hue around it with yellowish green beams beaming over Mahalik as he is getting hit by this beam. Now, anybody could buy these. You can go to the Canadian Mint website or Canada Post. They're $130 Canadian. The coin has a value of $200. There is only 4,000 of these being made, and from what I am hearing after today's research, they're already sold out, and it's all about pre-orders now. And it's absolutely amazing that they would make this. The Canadian Mint, their story behind it, Keith, is basically saying, well, we thought this was a pretty good story and a good piece of history that no one really talks about. But when it comes to UFOs, Keith, and I'm going to bring you in here, okay?
Yeah.
We don't really get into this. UFOs are not a big deal up here in Canada. If it was, Canadian history books would be all over Shag Harbor or other incidents.
Yeah. But that's the funny thing about the Canadian peoples. Okay. I kind of liken it to the same idea as storms. We get a winter storm up here, regularly, and we call them winter storms, and we carry on with the day. No offense to anybody, but south of the border, it seems everybody calls a winter storm like a Class 2 or a Class 3 hurricane or a tornado. And understandably, tornadoes make a mess. But people get very agitated. You go over into Europe and they get hit with them periodically, and people get agitated. Canadians, one of the biggest things I've noticed, even with the UFOs, is they'll see them and they'll go, yep, that was a UFO. And what did you want for lunch? It's a very laid-back outlook that seems to permeate a lot of the culture. Like a lot of Canadian culture. And you are right. Most Canadians don't have a clue about some of the bigger events. But then they don't go looking for them. It's really kind of a weird thing. You and I and quite a number of other people in this particular field, and let's face it, it's a small field, we go looking. We keep an eye open, or in some people's cases, you don't go looking, they sort of find you. But we take it seriously, and we're very, very clear that it's a real event. But I find it fascinating that of all the countries, that Canada would just all of a sudden, like you said, out of the blue, it's like there was no build-up to it. There was no nothing. There was no pre-announcement. It was just like, here it is. Now let's get on with next year's design.
And there's a process to this, though, Keith, because these images have to be approved by government.
Yeah. Well, people want disclosure.
So this is what the Royal Canadian Mint says, just so people understand. The Royal Canadian Mint is known for having, pardon me, before I start, this should say, this is from Alison Crawford, spokesman for the Royal Canadian Mint. She says, the RCM is known for having polar bears and maple leaves and beautiful natural settings on coins, but we also do a lot of coins that reflect Canada's culture. And some of our best stories are actually supernatural stories, citing Ogopogo and Lake Okanagan and the Quebec werewolf like Loup Garou. We wanted to share that story with the rest of the country. The thing is, I've read 2 articles now, 2 different quotes from the RCM, Royal Canadian Mint, that says about Canada's culture. We don't have a UFO culture up here. Now, I realize for a lot of our listeners, they're going to be saying, well, what's the big deal? Why, who cares? It's just a UFO coin. But up here, when you cross the 49th, you just don't see or hear about UFOs. That is why there are people like Grant Cameron, Victor Vigiani, Chris Rutkowski, Stanton Friedman, and others who are trying to figure out these UFO stories and what's Canada's role in ufology. And I think, Keith, that I'm not going to sit here and say, Keith, that this is the start of something. But it makes for an intriguing story because UFOs are not a part of Canada's culture at all.
Well, clearly that's where you're a little mistaken, but I do get your point. The funny part is, it's what I tend to look at as the hidden culture, the part of Canada that people don't talk about. And when I talk about people, I'm not talking about people from other countries. I'm talking about Canadians don't tend to talk about it. Right? But it's because, as near as I've come to understand it, Canadians take it all as part and parcel of the whole thing. And on the whole, from the people I've seen, I question the reasoning behind it on occasion, but on the whole, people are very laid back. They get very agitated about their own video game or their own piece of property. But I've always held that of all the places on the planet, this is the one that I find it hard calling it a country simply because of one factor. In my eyes, and understand, this is just my opinion, but in my eyes, a country is one set of laws for one set of people. And let's face it, it's hard finding three people on the same block that follow the same laws. Now, we've been talking over the past couple of years about disclosure, about the government coming out and acknowledging that it exists. And I've had the pleasure of citing some of the events that are taking place. Like in France, they've got a law against UFOs landing in this one city. They literally have a law there that if they ever land there, they're to be arrested. In the States, I think it's Massachusetts, they built a monument, right? And for Canada to come out and the Canadian Mint to go, by the way, we're putting this out because this really is an event that happened that is worth note. It is part of Canada's history. I think that's about as close to the government coming right out and saying, hey, by the way, we're not alone, as you're going to get.
Well, I do know that Victor Vigiani, who is head of Zealand Communications in Toronto, who is going to be starting a new group strictly for Canadians in conjunction with MUFON Canada to try and bring Canada's role into the entire UFO community and see what the role absolutely is. I know he is going to be pushing on this, and he actually called the Canadian Mint, and they told him the word culture as well. That it's part of Canadian culture. And Keith, yeah, we will agree to disagree here. And, I think the UFO subculture, like you said, is very quiet. And it's something that Canada being a reserved country, nonetheless, it is something where I find that, you just don't hear a lot of UFO discussion. There's not a lot of UFO, intrigue, even though some of the biggest named researchers in this field, from Paul Hellyer down to Stanton Friedman and Grant Cameron, and all the names I just listed are all Canadian. So we do have the people in the interest, but it's just not one of those topics that is discussed. So I think I'll agree to disagree with you that the mainstream public who does not follow the field of ufology, which would be the majority, I don't believe that they will even understand the purpose of this coin. And I think that's good because it may open the eyes to something that they are not fully understanding or wanting to believe.
Oh, and I absolutely agree with you on that part. From the number of people I've talked to, when you start talking about UFOs, and in all fairness, I find this between pretty much every country, most people, especially if they're not tapped into this field, are completely oblivious to not only what it means, but the ramifications that it may be having. People are so caught up in the here and now and what they used to have or that side of it, they miss a lot of what's going on right overhead. I was talking to one person who told me that, roughly speaking, from their research, only 1% of people actually look to the skies. Everybody else is looking at the ground. And if you're not looking skyward, let's face it, you're just not going to see a lot in the way of UFO activity.
No, and I agree with you. I agree with you on that. Let's get to Gail's question here in the Periscope chat. She is asking right off the bat, are Canadians embarrassed to talk about UFOs?
Not in the slightest, from my opinion, from my experience. It's just not one of the ongoing topics, if you will. But I don't know, Dave, have you ever heard of anybody that was embarrassed to talk about it?
I think there is, I wouldn't say it's an embarrassing thing. I think people love to talk about the topic when they have someone who is going to take them seriously. It's very much a one-on-one topic. It's not a group topic around here. So, you're not going to hear the topic of UFOs around 10, 12 people kind of gathered around. That's just not the way it works. Up here, it seems to be a topic of discussion that kind of revolves around a few people, and the fewer the better, because up here in Canada, we don't like bringing attention to ourselves, and we're a reserved nation, reserved people. And I really believe that we are people who are not wanting to, I don't want to say jump to conclusions, but we're not wanting to be that guy or that lady who comes out and next thing you know, everybody in their inner circle knows, oh, they were abducted by aliens, or she says she's abducted by aliens. There's still a lot of non-believers up here. Canada's a
Lord, yeah.
Yeah, and don't forget, I think that also adds to the conclusion that Canada's, over the last 30, 40 years has turned into a very agnostic/atheist type country, and for the majority of the population. And I think as that grows, I'm not saying it has anything to do with the tie-in with UFOs, because that's a little bit of a stretch, but I think that people are more into seeing is believing, and when you have most people who are not seeing these things, they choose not to believe it. Keith.
And that I would absolutely agree with. And ironically, the problem is that even when they do see it, because people don't wrap their brain around it, it's very quick to say that was just a trick of my eyes. But much as you pointed out that over the last several years, well, several decades, Canadians have become a whole lot more reticent to speak out or bring the attention to themselves about the strange events. People like you and I, well, we kind of get thrown into the middle of it. And this is where it gets to be difficult, because as soon as somebody like you or I sit down and talk to an individual, and I do agree with you, by the way, it really is more a one-on-one thing, at least to start. I've had the experience where I've started a one-on-one conversation, and the next thing I know, I've got 20 people standing around listening to the conversation. Not so much participating, but at least dropping an ear. And it's a bizarre thing to watch as the lights come on when people do finally notice it. But this is where I had a riot when we went down to the States last year, where the people are in public are so open to this kind of thing that you almost look at it as though they're talking about going to an ice cream parlor. It's like it seems to be that normal of a topic down there. And up here, it goes back to the idea of hide in the shadows and talk to people in hushed whispers, just in case.
We got a bunch of questions happening right now in Periscope, Keith, so I'm going to try and get to them right off the bat here. Sinbad is asking, are UFO sightings more popular in Western Canada or Eastern Canada? And I'm going to step in there right off the bat. I'm going to tell you, right now, leading the way is Eastern Canada, because that's the majority of Canada's population. We have 8 million people alone living in Toronto, and there are a lot of more people from Ontario East than there are Manitoba West. So I'm going to jump in there on that. You would agree with that, Keith?
Yeah, quite frankly, I would. It's long been known that that Eastern Canada has the higher population, so it stands to reason you'd have higher communication lines in that field, or for that matter, any other field, except maybe cannabis.
Yes, definitely. Cannabis is more West Coast.
Sorry, just had to throw that in, didn't I?
I wasn't prepared for that. Let's get to Alberta Dawn here. She is asking, do you think the Canadian Mint released the coin on April 1st so it wouldn't be taken as serious?
Well, much as that is a possibility, if there's one thing I found out, it's thinking about what caused the Canadian government to do something usually results in a headache and probably a migraine. But it is something to consider. But at the same time, it's no longer April 1st, and they're still answering the questions in the same way that they released it to celebrate that part of our culture. So it does, much as it's possible, it's more likely that it was simply the first of the month they got everything moved into place. I don't personally feel that it was designed specifically to mislead people or to get them to take it a little less stressfully.
Yeah, I would agree as well. And I'm just going to say it, I don't think it had anything to do with April 1st either, being April Fool's Day. I think it was just a matter of timing when the coin got done, and these things, they set a release date and they go for it. And that's just kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, especially when you look at the amount that they've talked about, the way they're answering it now. And granted, it's only like 5 days later, but they're still giving the same answer. I mean,
I agree.
If it were a joke, you'd think somebody would have said something about it by now.
Let's get to another question here. This one coming from Periscope. This one comes from Dino, who is asking, Ron, what are your thoughts on the majority of UFO talk, then, being in the United States?
Well, that's simply a case that, in my opinion, that the United States is a lot more unified from what I've seen in thought processes. So, of course, when Roswell came out and some of the other events that have come out, not the least of which was Travis Walton's abduction and the Benny Hill situation, because it got so much publicity in the States and everybody jumped on it, it has literally just continued since the opening, since it started. And so it stands to reason that the majority of the conversation will come out of the States, because they're a lot more vocal about many events. And again, Canadians tend to be a lot more quiet, a lot more, you can think what you will, I'm just not going to talk to you, I'm not going to say it's a good thing or a bad thing. And therefore the conversation never gets started up here a lot of the time. And of course we have to look at the other thing, look at the size of the population.
Well, you know what? You know what, though? We're Americans are a lot stronger than Canadians. And it's definitely not in hockey, except for women's hockey at the gold medal game this year at the Olympics. But beggars can't be choosers. Beggars can't be choosers. Where Americans are a lot more stronger than Canadians is Americans have, from what I have seen, have absolutely no fear in calling out their government. They may not get the answers that they want, but if they smell BS, they're going to call BS. Whereas here in Canada, up until recently being like the last 5 to 10 years, we have had this real trust going on with the government. We've had some real trust going on that we still believe in the good Canadian way that the government has our backs. Sure, they're going to tax the hell out of us, but what government doesn't? And they'll never explain that, but we still feel up here, maybe it's a false sense of security, but we still feel up here that the government has our backs on what is best for Canada and Canadians. Now, I can say this, a lot of people believe right now that the way Justin Trudeau is handling things, well, that is changing. That attitude is changing where Canadians are becoming more vocal. But for the most part, you don't see a lot of Canadian people calling out the government like you do in the United States, whether it's Obama, whether it's Trump, whether it's Bush, whether it's Clinton, whoever it may be. It just doesn't happen that way up here. So, I think that's a big reason why a lot of these UFO stories have been able to be swept under the carpet. because Canadian people, we have this vision of who we are. We're a peaceful nation, a UN peacekeeping force, and all sorts of stuff like that. But they don't give the credit for, what is actually happening behind the typical Canadian words. We're boring people, is what I'm trying to say in a big mouthful. We're boring.
Well, the funny part about it is, Canadians are quiet, and behind the scenes they've done some remarkable things. Take a look at the Canadian Arm. Just a mild addition to the space program, but that's because we sit up here and we just focus on what we're doing. And you are right. For the most part, people seem to look at what the Canadian government is doing and go, they're looking out for us. And, in all fairness, the funny part about it is that even when Canadians get upset about what the government is doing, the Canadians don't talk about impeaching a prime minister or about firing him. They talk about when his term is up, I'm not voting for him again. And then they go on with their day. With the UFO stuff, it's the same issue. You look at it, you have a quick conversation when you see one, right? We had one years ago, it'd be 20 years ago now, when I was working downtown, and we had a UFO show up right over top of my workplace. And I called a guy up to look at it, and long story short, he could not identify what it was, but he sure gave me a list of what it wasn't. The conversation for the next 2 days was lit up like a Christmas tree, and then it died. There was no more talk about it. And again, it's because the day was gone. We didn't look to the past about what had happened, right? And now we've got the situation of the Canadian government comes right out of left field, as far as the public goes, and went, oh, by the way, we're going to admit that we've got this UFO subculture that you really should hear about, which is indicative of another little change that is clearly coming up in the near future, which is more and more people and more nations coming out and saying, okay, here's the concrete acknowledgement that people have been looking for. I think this is just quite literally the start of a visual acknowledgement by various different bodies.
Brand new listener on Spreaker, going by Paladin 2012. Thank you so much for checking in with us, Paladin. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So his question is President Trump's Space Force just disclosure of the Solar Warden program? I have thought that as well. I really have. The part of me that is in the I want to believe section of this secret space program, I thought it was very, very coincidental coming, just after a few months previous where Tom DeLonge was saying that we needed to put nuclear weapons and a space force up there to protect us from all the evil aliens that were going to come and take us over. And then all of a sudden President Trump drops that line just like 4 or 5 days right after the To the Stars Academy releases their third UFO video. So I think, the I want to believe side of me says there's something to this. The reality side of me says it could be just President Trump being President Trump. What do you think, Keith?
Well, I find it hard to call it the secret space program, given the amount of information that, without doing research, I've ended up with. But is it a real event? Is it a real, in my opinion, putting nuclear weapons in outer space to protect yourself from a group of races that have already, 30 years ago, proved unequivocally that they could shut nuclear weapons down? Putting nuclear weapons up there as a defense seems a little overstated, but at least they're trying to do something. I don't feel that this is just President Trump beaking off about something. I do feel that this is him probably, what's the word I'm looking for? Unadvised. He likely did it on his own, but it's him opening up about something that is being put in place. But the one thing I do want to caution people of is I don't want people looking at this as it's another way for the government to try and control or try and railroad people into their way of doing things. Okay, we're evolving. Mankind is already off the planet, and it stands to reason that a military presence, a defensive superstructure out there, is a wise move. Okay, because let's face it, not everything out there. Let's take away sentient individuals, and let's go with just the natural creatures that are out and about. It does not make sense to go out into uncharted territory without some form of defense. You know, I don't know about you, but let's face it, I wouldn't be walking around out in your neck of the woods without a gun. Of course, in my case, I'd get lost before I got 3 blocks, but you get the idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all depends where you go. That's why I have a Bazooka Joe following me all over the place, so that way, in case something happens, I can trip him, and while he's falling, he can fire his gun, right?
Well, this is why it's always said you don't have to be able to outrun the bear, you just have to be able to outrun the guy with you.
Oh, absolutely.
That's just a sad northern joke in case you hadn't noticed.
No, but it is. It is something to be taken very seriously right now. You know what I'm saying? It is something to be taken seriously. I know there's a lot of questions, everyone, and I'm reading them just about, other topics outside of the whole Canadian UFOs. Because we're so close to break, I would like to stay with this topic before we get into some of the weird and strange that Keith does know about. Remember, the phone lines are open for hour number 2, 1-702-302-4556. Sorry, I just read Bazooka Joe's comment on Periscope. He goes, "I'm going to shoot you in the leg. I'm telling you." I'm like, "You bastard! You bastard!" Yeah.
Hey! We're supposed to be speaking some other language other than that one.
I know, but it's Bazooka Joe, and I was shaking my fist at him because I know he and his wife are watching right now, and they live like maybe a mile and a half from me here. So, Bazooka Joe is my go-to guy when I go in the forest. That guy is, he's brilliant out there. I absolutely love the guy. He's phenomenal, and I still would trip him, but nonetheless.
But you'd mourn his passing, right?
Well, it all depends, because if he does shoot me in the leg while we're out searching for Bigfoot and grizzly bear decides to show up, then
yeah, in all fairness, I don't think that he'd be shooting you in the leg when you see Bigfoot. The grizzly bear, possibly. Yeah. Kodiak, you can virtually guarantee it.
Yeah. The wolf pack that will be surrounding us. Who knows? We'll see what happens. We got about 6 minutes before we got to go to break here. And I know there's a couple more questions in regards to Canadian UFOs. Catalina is asking, are there any aerospace industry in Canada? If so, what are some of the names of the companies? Bombardier is the big one. And they also they're more famous for their Can-Am ATVs and snowmobiles, but they also make airplanes and smaller type like Learjet kind of aircraft, and they're probably the biggest. Back in the 60s, we did have a program called the Avro program, and that was one of the premier programs going on, and when they shut that down, I believe it was Prime Minister John Diefenbaker who shut down that project at the behest of all Canadians because it was a deal worked out with the United States President at that time, which I believe was it Nixon? No.
I am certainly the last person to ask about who did what in what year.
Yeah, I believe I believe it was Richard Nixon, and it kind of killed the Canadian aviation program. There was Canadair and another couple of companies, but nothing very big. But a lot of the American companies like Lockheed and Boeing, they do have manufacturing plants up here. and they do a little bit of building up here. I believe for the F-35 program, the F-22 program, there is some parts for those fighters that are actually made in Canada. But as for having our own, like down there, you got Lockheed, you got Grumman. I believe you still have Grumman, or maybe Grumman shut down or was bought over. You got Boeing, you got a bunch of other companies. We don't have that type of infrastructure as much as you guys do. All right. Christoph is asking, how about Royal Canadian Air Force reports that were declassified? I haven't got my copies of those yet, Chris, and I don't think Keith has for him as well, but there's like 9,500 pages if you go to the Transport Canada website in regards to UFOs.
Yeah, in all fairness, I certainly don't, but then again, I didn't go looking for them. As I've mentioned to people multiple times, I don't actually research this stuff. I just simply live it. So the paperwork that people are talking about, it's very seldom that I've actually heard of a particular issue, never mind gone and read about the thing. But that doesn't mean, let's face it, there's a lot going on that people just haven't been told about. And it's starting to come out like it is over the rest of the world, which does beg the question, why now? Well, let's face it, we've entered into a new century. Not to mention a new millennium.
Not just that, Keith, but you have to think that it is coincidental. And I'm not saying there's anything to this, because I know there are people out there, well, there they go, saying Canadians are going into disclosure. And you know who I'm talking about. I'm saying that to the audience on Twitter. But I'm not saying, to me, it's just coincidental that we have all of this potential disclosure stuff coming out of the United States. Canada, which has been absolutely silent on it, goes and creates this coin when majority of Canadians don't even know that this situation even happened.
They don't.
You ask any Canadian, hey, who is Stephen Mahalik? Who? Oh, didn't he play for the Winnipeg Jets back in 81, 82? No, he didn't.
Yeah, well, in all fairness, I've been doing this a long time, and I don't know 3/4 of the people that people mention. I mean, I've personally met Grant Cameron, and obviously I've met you, but there is not a lot of the people that people talk about that I've ever even talked to or met. When I told you a long time ago, and the listeners, that I was a recluse for 90% of my life, it wasn't really an exaggeration.
We are down to our final minute here in the first hour of Spaced Out Radio. That was a quick hour, and it's like I said, Canadian UFO history is something that is still quite secretive, and hopefully in the near future we will be able to see more, Keith, of stories like this coming out, because I do believe it's important.
Oh, and I agree with you 100% on both counts. It's extremely important because it on top of everything else, it draws Canada into that global community of countries that have seen this sort of thing across the globe. It's not Canada hasn't seen it, it's just Canada hasn't said anything.
Yeah,
but they sure came out with a big bang in this one.
Definitely they did. Keith, I'm going to get you to hold on. We're going to hop out for our first break of the night here. And for all you divers out there, if you want to go have some fun, apparently you can still dive into Lake Ontario somewhere and find parts to the Avro program. Because when they killed the Avro Arrow and the Avro program up here in Canada, they dumped everything into Lake Ontario. So you might be able to get some good stuff in there, And trust me, it's something that Canadians are still quite sore over. Nonetheless, we're going to get more to your experiences. We're going to open up the phone lines in hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio here. So stick around and let's get to your questions and comments. Anything ET related coming up with our Keith Andrews and Spaced Out Radio right after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hey Space Travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at SpacedOutRadio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at SpacedOutRadio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At SpaceOutRadio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to SpaceOutRadio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at SpacedOutRadio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Joe Roop is back in SOR headquarters, broadcasting to you live. He's going to have a great guest. I know he is. Joe Roop, Spaced Out Saturdays, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. On Sunday, we are going to be doing another network replay, so I highly suggest you stick around for that. It's going to be a lot of fun network replay on Sunday night as well, and we're going to keep it at that for the time being. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. All your shows can be heard at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM in New Orleans at over 160 countries around the world. We are also live what the hell is OT? We are live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, and you can also listen to us digitally on thefringe.fm. I love it. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Craniocleidostosis. I almost got that. Craniocleidosis ostosis. Something like that. I hate Friday night passwords. Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you know where to find us. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're all there. Just type in Spaced Out Radio. You could check out our archives. Please subscribe to our page. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. I would appreciate that. And, of course, our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping at our Spaced Out Radio store, read the Encounter online, or watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. The first Friday of the month, we have our Keith Andrews in here for the ET Connection, where we talk all things extraterrestrial. Phone lines are open at 1-702-302-4556. That number, once again, 1-702-302-4556. Keith, how you doing?
Not bad at all. And thank everybody for returning to listen to us or putting up with us, depending on how you look at it.
I got to try this again. Craniocleidostosis. Craniocleidostosis. There we go. You know, the problem is I was reading it on the wrong page. Craniocleidostosis. Whatever the hell that means. I don't even think it has a meaning, to be honest with you. But that's just me. That's just me.
My guess is it's got to have a meaning. I just have no clue just yet what it is.
No, it's ridiculous, to be absolutely blunt. It's absolutely ridiculous, and I don't even think Bill knows about it. All right, let's get to some questions from our audience while we are waiting for phone calls to come on in about ET experiences, and we want to know about yours, so please call in at 1-702-302-4556. We'll also take your questions in any of the chat rooms or on Twitter. Gail is asking, does Keith know about the space treaty and what's it all about?
Well, I do know that now it depends on if we're talking the space treaty regarding between the world, the world governments, or regarding the off-world. Now, the whole idea, as far as humans go, people have heard about the Mir space station. What they haven't heard about, for the most part, is the three space stations that are up there that are multinational, that mankind has worked together for years putting up. And basically it boils down to this. We're putting satellites up. They are not to be used as a weapon base against man. Ultimately, that's really what it boils down to. They're supposed to be up there, and the agreement basically is that they are being used from a defensive structure in case there's a problem. In case there's an off-world problem. But they did that as a predecessor for another part of the same project, that they are starting to put things in place to start building starships capable of much faster interplanetary, but ultimately interstellar travel. And the reason for it, of course, is because it's easier to launch a ship in space than it is to get one launched at that size out of the atmosphere.
Is there any protective areas for people on this planet that these extraterrestrials really give a care about?
As a overall massive side, no. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there are certain areas they're a little bit more cautious about because of the potential problem. For instance, the off-worlders don't want places like your nuclear reactors, or they don't want places where medical research is being done with highly volatile things. It's not a question of they want mankind not to do it, but they do keep an eye out to make sure there isn't any absolute ecological disaster that happens because of an oversight. But as far as this city or this town of specific import, not any that I'm aware of.
Well, let me bring in an addition to this question, Keith, because let's say that the United States does put a Space Force in.
Yes.
How are the off-worlders going to react to something like that, if that project includes nuclear weapons?
Well, basically, they're not going to do a thing. And mankind can do what it will from that standpoint. They're not going to worry about it if mankind puts nuclear weapons out there, because nuclear weapons, it's sad to say, and I know there's a lot of military people that are going to say, military people in, shall we say, the upper echelon, that are going to go, well, nuclear power is extremely good. It's very potent. The off-worlders are going to look at it and go, but we can shut it down with the flick of a switch. So why worry about it? That said, are they paying attention to the politics behind, or the motivation behind, what mankind is doing? The answer is definitively yes. But they're not looking at it as a danger to them. Okay.
Do they even worry about nuclear weapons? I mean, I would look at it and say no, they don't, because if they have the technology to get here, I'm pretty sure they have the weaponry to say, hey, boys and girls, yeah, that's not very kind.
Well, let's face it. What is it, 30 years ago now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 30 years ago. They turned around and...
Hello.
Hey, one sec, caller. Go ahead, Keith.
No problem.
Yeah. 30 years ago, the off-worlders proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that nuclear weapons then were harmless to them. 30 years later, it's even more of a who really cares if you've got them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of like somebody in a main battle tank here worrying about somebody that's got a rock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. let's go to the phone lines here. Area code 443. Who are we speaking with here tonight?
Oh, this is Sleepy Dave calling in from my other phone.
Hey,
I'm using the other
Sleepy
phone.
Dave.
Listen to you.
Wonderful.
How you doing, David?
Good, Sleepy Dave. How you doing, brother?
Good. I just wanted to let Mr. Andrews know that because you interviewed me several months back about the thing I was investigating with Chris, and the way that the security was explained to me, that there's very few people in government that actually know the real story of what's going on. And do you think it's possible that that still could be true today? Even because this was back in '77. I mean, we're talking 40 years ago.
Well, the answer to that is absolutely. You see, if we go back to when, and I'm just talking modern civilization, when the off-worlders reinitiated contact and tried getting to the governments made a number of contracts, but the governments double-backed on them. They breached a lot of the contracts the off-worlders had made. So the off-worlders turned to the major corporations, who proved to be more greedy than, shall we say, benevolent. And what happened was the off-worlders turned to the individuals that weren't well-placed in order to get the information out. Kind of sneak it past the front gate, if you will.
And here's another thing. He had mentioned to me that one of the beings that he actually got, I don't want to say was friends with, but was friendly to him, stated that in '77 the government was working on a treaty with him, and that kind of goes in line with what others have said over the years. But it is amazing to me that there was so much UFO activity on Shemya Air Force Base, on Shemya Island there in the Aleutians in '77. There was a lot going on in that base that many veterans are not even talking about to this day. And actually, I've only been able to contact probably about 4 or 5 that would open up to me about what was going on. I mean, there was UFOs taking off and landing. Chris said that he saw no more than at least 20 different instances over the years. And he said it happened so often he could sit on the cliff and watch them land and take off and land and take off. And
right.
It was just, the story is just, I think it's one of the best stories that's hardly been told. And a lot of people, for some reason, just won't touch it. And I have to commend Dave for letting me come on back then to tell at least some of the story. I mean, we could have talked for 6 hours about it.
Yeah, we could have.
I mean, yeah.
Well, that's.
But I was going to say I'll let you go and let somebody else give a chance. But I just wanted to call in and
thanks for calling, Sleepy Dave. Appreciate that, man.
Thanks, Dave.
You take
Thanks
care.
so much. Appreciate it.
What do you think about that, Keith?
Well, it's not surprising, first of all, that that even back then the governments didn't know much about what was going on, and it really hasn't proven to be much else. It hasn't changed that much as far as what they know, which is why I find one of the big reasons why I find it fascinating that all of a sudden they've dropped this coin on the land, on the plate. But this is why it's the unknown people that are able to get the information. And frankly, as Sleepy Dave put it, the fact that you've got the backbone to sit there with a international show and go, okay, let's get the word out, regardless of what people are thinking. You really should give yourself a pat on the back for that one.
Preacher has a question, but you know what, Preacher? I want you to call in, if you don't mind, at 1-702-302-4556. Or, Preacher, if you need, drop me the phone number, and I will call you into the show, because I want you to ask your question to Keith directly, if you don't mind. Let's go over to Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Canadian Joe is asking, what species was it that shut down the nuclear plants here, or the weapon sites?
Well, it was actually the consortium that set it up, but most of the ships that showed up were operated by the Greys. Now, of course, going hand in hand with the Greys, you can bet the Nords were on board, as in physically on board. But it was a consortium that authorized it and said, no, we're not having this mess. Because, well, their concern, as I've mentioned before, is literally to protect the planet while while making certain that mankind still is the dominant, shall we say, protector of the planet itself. Now, I could get really sidetracked there, so I won't do that to you, Dave. But no, that's who actually authorized it or set it in motion.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, I'm just going to call in Preacher here because he had an experience the other day that he really wanted to talk to you about. So I'm just going to call him in here. All right.
Okay,
so Preacher, I know you're listening. I'm going to be calling you in here. I know you're at work, and but that's okay. We're going to call him in right now because he's got an interesting story that just happened just the other day. Preacher, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good, buddy. How are you?
Hey.
Doing all right.
All right, I'm going to let you take it from here and tell us the background of the story here, Preacher.
Okay, I woke up, God, what was it, last week before last, bridge of my nose felt like it had a beer bottle bashed across it. I'd had sort of a restless night sleeping, and on the show, I mentioned it, and you did the pendulum thing, which... Anybody has ever heard that story knows that Dave's pendulum and I go way back. And you asked your spirit guide, Jordan, about it, and he said that I had been picked up by reptilians. Apparently they put some kind of an implant or something in the bridge of my nose, or did some kind of procedure. And I mean, it was the kind of sore that I would have remembered doing it during the day. If I'd banged if I'd have done it while I was awake, I'd have known it. And the fact that it hurt as much as it did, and it didn't wake me up, tells me something weird happened. But that's pretty much what I know so far. I'm not sure which alien race it was, or which reptilian race it was. I'm assuming it's not the ones that find us edible, or I've just got too much fat content for. I was wondering if you had any insight about it. Oh, yeah, like with great white sharks.
Yeah, we could go all over the place with that one there, Eric.
Well, I'm not detecting anything with a tri-field meter or a EMF. I took all my new gear and waved it around my face and didn't really find anything.
Well, this is where this is one of the things that tells me a couple of probabilities. One, we can write off obviously we can write the Techlex off. Okay.
Because I came back.
I say, well, yeah. Yeah, we'll start there.
No missing pieces that I know of.
I mean, technically, there is a branch of them that it could have been, but you can track their markers. Their if you will, their bugs, their implants. You can track. Same as the Tormenon. You don't have to worry about them being the ones. The fact that you were passed out as solidly as you were, there's one type of tracker that I know of that you're not going to pick up because it's literally a biocell. They literally take your cells, modify them, and put them back. Modify them so they can broadcast.
I had a physical dent. I mean, it hurt like hell, and it was red, but there was no external mark. But I could feel a dent up at the top, up the end of my nose. It's up by the eyes, right there at the upper part of the bridge. Yeah, and it feels as symmetrical as it's ever been. Like whatever the dent was, it has filled in with something.
Well, let's face it, the body will regenerate. Okay, and when you take a biofield and you amplify it, you remember when I was down in concrete and I showed you that scar on my arm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. It was using biomagnetoelectrics that I accelerated the healing to the point that I put the bone back together in 9 days. They do the same kind of an idea because they're using a biomagnetoelectric implant where it literally, they pull part of your nose, and the answer to your question is you're dealing with Srazazian. Okay, they are literally our allies. And the biggest reason for it is not invasion of privacy. It's because of the fact that you're one of these weird scientists that actually is a true scientist. You take something you don't know, and you start eliminating everything you can that makes logical sense, and then you start trying to figure out the rest. And it's people like you that they're trying to track down to be
Well, let
able
them
to
know.
work with them.
Well, let them know that they don't have to, like, abduct. They couldn't be so alarming in... I mean, I appreciate the fact that they anesthetized me before they did a procedure. That's better than our own doctors do, but they don't have to, knock me out and completely erase. They could not be so alarmingly configured that it would be... I don't know. I think I have a wide latitude of what would be too shocking to withstand.
Well, and I do agree with you for the most part. The reason that they do that is because until they get a bearing on just exactly who they're dealing with, on a up close and personal level, they've had too many times when somebody has appeared to be very focused, capable of handling the worst shock in the world, and they go completely, psychotic when this sort of thing gets dropped in their lap. So it's sort of it's a precautionary first step, but under the circumstances, you can almost bet that it's not going to be that long and you'll have conscious memory of what's going on.
Awesome. I think.
Yeah.
Keith,
you remember that thing?
Keith, sorry for interrupting. I wanted to ask you this question here in regards to, Preacher and I have had a pretty good history with using pendulums with each other and confirming and reconfirming things. So, him being a scientist and believing what a pendulum says, I think is a credit to him having an open mind like that. But my question is, when he was taken, when you hear the word reptilian, you hear a lot of negativity around that. You rarely hear the positive. How does one know whether or not it's a positive experience from a certain type of species that has such a bad reputation?
Well, first and foremost, that is done. It literally boils down to a personal interpretation. In other words, once somebody has been taken, if they come back and they're panic-stricken and they're all over the place emotionally speaking, you can bet for them it wasn't a pleasant experience. On the other hand, when you take somebody like Preacher here that has turned around and gone, okay, it was a little different. It was a little painful waking up, but I'm really not that bad. I'm in no harm. Clearly, we've got a positive experience. Okay. To me, I kind of liken it like when you're going to the dentist. Some people, you can go to the same dentist and have 3 different outcomes as far as whether it was a good experience.
That's true.
It's a little hard to go, here's one way of telling. I mean, let's face it, it's pretty blatantly obvious if you wake up and your arm's been broken in a way that it never was before. This is pretty black and white. That was no fun. But even for you, Eric, it was a case of things, your life. If you think about this in terms of when you first started bridging the gap from what you grew up knowing as pure science into this field, which is a science in and of itself, it's the same kind of transitional awareness that you're going to go through, and you're going to find the same kind of a leap over the next couple of months. It ought to be a ride, and I would strongly recommend that you start keeping a daily journal, especially of events like when you wake up and you're feeling a little off, or you notice a new divot or something. It would be wise to start cataloging it for data analysis purposes.
Yeah, because I think it happened. It happened during broad daylight. That's right. It was That's why I need to have my journal, so I'd have my dates down better, because it happened. Would have happened in broad daylight, because while I was asleep, and I believe it would have happened Sunday afternoon. Sometime between the time I got home from work Sunday and the time I got up to come in.
Right.
So it was at some point there. Yeah, okay. I'll get me a journal book and start writing stuff down.
Keith, I want to hop in here while Preacher's still here. Daytime abduction, where would they take him away, and if so, how? Because he has a physical trauma, or would this be something that they did inside his home?
In all likelihood, they yanked him out of there. And the how is the easy part. Okay. It's literally transspatial relocation. They simply, by colloquial terms, he was teleported.
Beam me up, okay.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, look at the bright side. They didn't put you back in 5 different places.
Okay, so if that's the case where they basically beamed him up, would that ship then be noticeable on radar? Would it be that high up where it wouldn't be? Would it be cloaked? Where would that ship be in conjunction for his house? Because obviously the ship is going to be cloaked, so that way it's not hovering over his house.
Well, given the level of technology, it would not be surprising to find they'd done it from orbit. But even if they didn't, all they have to do is by modifying the electromagnetic field, they can actually make to mankind's technology. They can make their ship just far enough out of sync that a radar, the wave that humans use for radar, would pass straight through the vehicle and never even recognize it. Wouldn't even notice it was there in the first place. And if you couple that with optical realignment, and anybody local isn't going to see it. This is one of the reasons why I keep telling people, if the off-worlders were to launch an attack, it'd be over before anybody knew it had started.
Yeah.
But that's the easiest way to do it. And I mean, I've witnessed this stuff, 4 years ago now, when I was down at the Experience Your Speak conference. I watched these people fade out. I watched the teleporter go, which was remarkable to watch. I thought it was funny, really, especially the look on everybody's face when they were gone. But the range of this equipment, quite frankly, pulling you off the planet with them in orbit wouldn't be a problem. And the other side of that, Dave, is would it be visible to the space station or to the satellites outside? Again, it's really not that hard to hide a signal when you're dealing with technology that is that far above mankind's.
Mm-hmm. Preacher,
yes.
Preacher, you want to hang out?
Yeah, sure.
Well, you are the preacher, so why not? Let's get to another question here from the audience. Let's move on a little bit. Carla is asking, if the off-worlders care about preventing a large-scale ecological disaster, like you said, Keith, why haven't they done anything about Fukushima?
Well, because Fukushima wasn't actually as large as what the one back in 86 would have been. 86 would have been a global wipeout. Fukushima, much as it is a terrible disaster, terrible ecological disaster, it isn't of that caliber that we're talking about. The other part of the question, why haven't they come down and basically spanked people's head, backside and said, hey, knock it off? They don't need to. And the reason I say that is because people around the world are telling the governments and the corporations, knock off the stupidity, start cleaning up your own mess. Okay, mankind already knows it's got to clean up its mess. The problem is that the people that are in power don't seem to care as much about the ecological side of it as they do about the profit, the bottom line. And all the off-world intervention on the planet, unless they were to come in and, well, if the off-worlders were to come in and force mankind to straighten itself out, mankind would not be happy with the outcome. Okay, because their methods are, to say the least, shall we say brutal, but they are thorough. But that's why the off-worlders don't just come down and clean it up.
Well, there were reports that there were actually UFOs spotted, or that did intervene somewhat with Chernobyl, ameliorated some of it. They didn't cure it or patch it up altogether, but supposedly there was some there was some kind of like I agree that if they just came and cleaned it up, we'd think, well, hell, anything we do now, they'll just fix for us. And I think, that's, we're the wrong species to do that with.
Well, yeah, I mean, mankind does have a tendency, and this is a good thing, of taking things a little bit too laid back. For some reason, humans seem to have a common adversary. And from the off-worlder standpoint, an ecological adversary to the very planet, if it's not going to kill the planet, is far better than them watching different countries going to war against each other.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a call here coming up right now from area code 360. Who are we speaking with tonight?
Oh, hi, Dave. This is Yvonne.
Hi, Yvonne. Do you have a question for Keith?
Yeah, because after I learned that I had been abducted, it made me start, going back to what I was experiencing after that. And do ETs just take you and do experiments and tests, or do they sometimes, put you into, situations and you have to kind of figure out how to get out of it?
Keith, before you answer that, Yvonne, I'm going to get you to turn your television or your radio down when it's ever causing some background noise there. And Keith, okay. Did you get the question, Keith?
Yes, I did.
Okay, fire away.
Okay, the answer to your question is yes. Sometimes, sometimes they will put people, depending on the race, they'll put people into a different situation. Because what they're doing is, instead of blood samples, they're looking for cognitive processing. Figure out how the common person, if you will, can mitigate a challenge.
Okay. Yeah, because, I was having weird experiences. I'd be, finding myself out, what appears looking like a desert, and then there would be, a slab type thing. You know what I mean? Like a door. And I'd look at it, and I couldn't find a handle, and I'd look in the back of it, and then I realized, I just walked right through it, and I was back home.
Yeah, and that's what they were doing was checking your reaction, and they were undoubtedly looking for biological readout and pheromonal exchange based on your reaction to walking through a temporal distortion.
Oh, I see. So what were they? Because initially, what I thought was, I would be, I was kind of just like you. I was in a reclusive state for about 6 or 7 years because I was having so many of these experiences where, I'd be sitting, be quietly in my house, and I'd be sitting in my little recliner, and all of a sudden I just fall asleep, and then off I'm on on this experience or like a adventure.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, because you were taking it that way, it was giving them the opportunity to really study the changes that were happening to the way that you were looking at different situations without worrying about mental collapse.
Yeah, well, I ended up eventually, having to go to like a naturopath who was also a transitional healer, because sometimes it was happening like 3 times in a day or something, you know what I mean? And I was getting like exhausted.
Well, yeah, and this is one of the things that you could have done had you known was literally when you were up there, when you had been taken, all you would have had to do was say, hey, guys, look, I don't mind this so much, but I need some sleep. And they would have cut back on the amount of pulling.
Yeah, because I wasn't aware of like the ET alien thing, I thought they were just my guides putting me through training missions or something. Because my Kumu, when I first was kind of, before this, taking away type experiences happened, my Kumu was telling me that, that I had shamanic heritage, and all I have, I don't have to take classes and all that jazz, all I have to do is to remember. And so that's why when I had started having these experiences, I thought that, well, it was just my guides helping me to remember. You know what I mean?
I understand entirely where you're coming from, and it makes total sense.
So we're really like, yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion, you're one of the lucky people.
Well, yeah, because nothing has been negative. The only time I got a little, quick, wondering, I got caught in like a time loop. I found myself, I was repeating the same action. You know what I mean? And I was thinking, when it happened about the 3rd or 4th time, I said, wait a minute, did I come out of my trance or whatever too fast or something so I'm not connected?
In a manner of speaking, now this only happened a couple of years ago, I take it?
Went on, in 2006 when, I first had that thing about the white light and I'm driving, you know what I mean? Well, then it started, it lasted, by 2012, you know what I mean? I told him to, I did set a limit, you know what I mean? Because I was like,
okay,
I in public,
I can explain the time loop easy. Technically it was, but at that point, mankind was just really getting into the idea of the gaming systems that are being used now. And what they did was they were running you through a sequence that you weren't getting quite right. And it's kind of like in today's video games where, if you don't do it right, your character dies, so you reset at the beginning of that quest. And
I see.
They were trying to figure out how to make it work that would make sense to you and still give them the information they were looking for.
Yeah, because, I was finding myself like what appeared to be like maybe like a jungle or a rainforest type situation. And then I'd find this kind of like I would go back into ancient times, it seems, or ancient cultural times. You know what I mean? Where I would find this altar covered on all these vines, and then I'd see all this kind of like writing on it, which I don't totally at all understand. You know what I mean? Or I'd be I've been tossed out in the universe, Keith, and I'm looking, and I have, I'm an eye in terms of constellations, and I'm supposed to find my way home back to Earth.
Yep. And that was, but you can bet they were tracking you to make sure you got home. But again, mankind has this interesting situation where the way that humans think, they can get the answer without knowing the question. Okay? Like, they'll do something. So this is what they were looking at, is how far that actually goes. How far, because your brain was holding was handling the stress. So they were undoubtedly looking to sort things out.
Mm-hmm. But then they also would transform me into a different thing. You know what I mean? I mean, because one time I came back and I looked at my foot, and it wasn't my human foot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things, but
Yeah,
not to be rude, but we.
Oh no, I understand.
But
All
I
right.
do hope that helps.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for
Yeah,
calling
bye.
in. Appreciate that. All right, let's get to some more questions here. We have a bunch of new users because of our setup here on Periscope, and I want to get to a couple of their questions if you don't mind, Keith. And,
Not in the slightest.
And Preacher, how you doing? How's your nose?
It's still. I notice if I put on my sunglasses or mostly my sunglasses. You've seen them. They got that really heavy bridge piece on them. But not near as tender, and it doesn't look like I got smacked in the nose with a dinner plate. So it's better than it was, that's for sure.
All right. Well, there is a question for you, Preacher, on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio from Ghost of Ben Turpin. He is saying, what's Preacher's copay like for alien Medicare? I might have to switch.
Probably if I went through the emergency room for it, $500.
Well, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. All right, let me get to some questions here from Periscope. And I'm just trying to, I got to scroll up here, guys. Blonde Wolf is asking, Keith, because he's brand new to us, so give him a little break here. He's asking, how do you know all of this stuff, and how is it possible that it's accurate?
Well, the accuracy part, the best I can tell you is over the last several years, I've talked to a lot of people, told them about things that were going on. Say people, and when I talk about people, I mean people that were in a technological position to double check. Not the least of which, like we can go back to the time when BBSs and news groups were the way of talking on computers. And I ended up dealing with some pretty interesting, well-placed people that verified what I was telling them. As far as how I found out, well, we start with day one when I was born and ended up running into them firsthand. So I've been doing this now for 54 years. Be 55 in a couple of weeks. But how I can prove it, maybe the best way to put it is if I go back when I was a kid, I used to tell the doctors that they would never understand human healing until they looked at the triple helix. And of course, I was told, you can't know anything about that. That's all fake. It's your imagination. It's not real. Until late 98 or early 99, when the major research centers discovered the triple helix. What I didn't know back in the 70s was they didn't have the technology to see it. The same thing applies to a number of the ships. I remember being on one show, and I'd mentioned that night that there was a bunch of cruisers that had just rolled into the sector, and the very next day, the person that I'd been talking to turned around and said they'd been in touch with the government, with NASA, who had verified three unknown vessels moving passing Pluto, which was where I had pointed out they were coming in from. So, can I prove it? Not a prayer. But give it 30 years, you'll get to find the proof. And, it's not that I'm trying to avoid it. It's just, unfortunately, that's when the proof usually shows up. And no, go ahead.
No, I'm just kind of hanging out listening, man.
The thing is, I don't have a way of clinically proving it because I don't have a scientific background. I know I was listening in on a show one day, and the question that was asked was how the little ships could be seen, but people couldn't see the big ships. And the speaker that was on, I wasn't actually a guest, I was in the chat room. And the speaker that was on had said they didn't know. So I just typed into the chat room. I typed in, well, once you understand the oscillatory densification of the tri-transtemporal equilarity, it's pretty simple. I talked to a lady outside of the group because of that. She turned out to have a master's in astrophysics, and according to her, I was discussing with her cutting-edge astrophysics. Okay, the cute part is I failed college. So, unfortunately, it's up to the individual to figure out how I pulled that one. Because I just don't have the proof.
And it is tough to try and find that. Let's move on here. And once again, I got to scroll back up here because the chat room is just hopping in Periscope tonight, so please bear with me. Gail is asking, Keith, you once said that they, the off-worlders, had to be asked before they would come help on Earth. And this is going back to what you said about Fukushima earlier. Would that still be prudent for today?
Absolutely. The problem is it's got to be, like, Fukushima is under control, and mankind has currently the technology to clean it up. If, the off-worlders will give people guidance to put things, it will put things in perspective to point people in the right direction to correct the problem. Okay, that's basically what they do is they point people in the direction of being able to sort it out, explaining or trying to explain what's necessary. Okay, and this is one where Preacher can actually relate, but try explaining to a layman how to use molecular bonding to clean the radioactive toxin out of the water by making it bond to the water and pull itself apart.
Yeah, it's kind of make it not toxic anymore. Or you have to put some kind of resin that the toxicity can bind with and then remove the resin. There's no free ride on any of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how it works from that end. Okay, but it boils down to people have to, it's sort of a case of by working together, people can actually do it, and the off-worlders are doing what they can to point it out.
Yeah, the technology to clean that mess up exists. It's just a matter of the will and, the world governments, instead of deciding to fight over petrodollars, saying, hey, let's clean up the crap, the plastic that's floating around in a big gyre in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and let's clean up the radiation in Fukushima before we start getting Godzilla-like salmon flopping up on the beach. That's
hey, hold on, that would be a good fight, man. I'd go back to the river for that fight.
Oh, me too. Till you landed it, then what?
That's where a shotgun comes in handy.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a 460 Magnum, I think, would do the trick.
No, it's more fun on about a 15-pound test line. That's what I landed my 47-pounder on, Preacher.
Oh my God.
17-pound test line.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a beautiful fight. And then at the end of it, I gave him away to a friend to eat them all up. All right, let's get to a question from Kevin here. Canadian Kevin is asking, Keith, why do ET races even care about Earth?
Because of the database that is built into the neural net and the human genome, into the cell structure of the entire area. This is the greatest database in the sector. And therefore, they're protecting it.
God, that is so close to what Douglas Adams said in Hitchhiker's Guide. That the whole idea they made another Earth was because there was all this information on it.
Well, fortunately, they didn't make another Earth, but there is another one. Well, technically, no. It's called Mobius, and it's on the other side of the sun. That's why you'll never see it from Earth. But
do we have more of a just a pure diversity of life forms on Earth? I mean, we've got one dominant, humans, are the dominant life form. There's got to be planets out there where more than one species has co-evolved, and you have more than one dominant species.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely there are other ones. It's just because of, and it's something that is hard to really fathom, but it's because of the vibratory interaction on the planet itself that plus, of course, the state that mankind is at, that the civilization is at, that has got their attention, because mankind has gotten back to that bridge where they're either going to make this run or they're going to blow themselves back into the Stone Age. And from a xenosociological standpoint, it is extremely exciting to watch this happen. Of course, they've got to take records.
Gentlemen, we only got about 10 seconds here before we got to go to our final break of the night. Our Keith Andrews is with us. We got the preacher on, a resident scientist as well, on Spaced Out Radio, kind of hanging out the first Friday of the month. Keith comes on for the ET Connection, where we take your phone calls. We also take your questions in the chat rooms and on Twitter. Anything you want to ask about ET-related content, Keith is the man to talk to. So we're going to be back with one more break here, and we'll get right back to it, as well as the Thought of the Day coming up right after this. Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
We're lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on SpacedOutRadio.com.
There's stories, then there's the truth. Do any of us really trust the news anymore? This is Jamie Sexton, owner of Rebel Planet News. The third Thursday of every month, I appear on SpacedOutRadio.com to bring you the truth you deserve, without mainstream media lies or alternative media fear-mongering. We'll get to the heart of the story and deliver the truth you're seeking. So come join us here for the Rebel Planet at SpacedOutRadio.com.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Joe Roop is in SOR headquarters with Spaced Out Saturdays. He's going to have just a fantastic show. We're going to play another replay on Sunday. For all of you who are interested, the chat room will be opened up that night as well. So make sure you stay tuned on that, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, The Fringe FM, and if you're listening in on The Fringe FM, we thank you for that. Remember, you can follow us at thefringe.fm. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Craniocleidodycystosis. Craniocleidodycystosis is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio, Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Give our page a like. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. We would appreciate that. You can watch us live on Periscope.tv every Monday through Friday night. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including riding along on the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month, rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping at our Spaced Out Radio store, read The Encounter online, or watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. Now, before we go back to the phone lines and bring Keith in, you know, I just want to tell this story here because it's kind of affected me. All right, and it happened a number of hours ago in Nipawin, Saskatchewan today. There was a tragic bus accident. Now, during this time of year across Canada, it is playoff hockey time. And there is a lot of love for playoff hockey, especially in small towns where their hockey team is their identity. And traveling on Highway 335 today, a hockey team from Saskatchewan a Junior A team called the Humboldt Broncos lost some of their players today. These are 16 to 20-year-old kids. We don't know how many at this time, but if everybody on Twitter can go to @Humboldt, Humboldt spelled Humboldt, Humboldt Broncos, Humboldt Broncos, @Humboldt Broncos, and just send your condolences because these kids were playing a game that they love. They were supposed to play a hockey game tonight. Unfortunately, a semi-truck T-boned the bus, killing some of these kids. And junior hockey, like I said, is a very, very important part of Canada's legacy, of Canada's future NHL stars, kids who are trying to get college scholarships both in Canada and the U.S. And I coached junior hockey for a year. And I've been on the bus trips, and I've seen how the kids are on a bus. And these are good, disciplined kids who are playing for the love of the game and potentially a college scholarship or maybe something more. And thoughts and prayers with the @Humboldt Broncos. So please, if you don't mind, go on Twitter. Go to @Humboldt Broncos. That's HUMBOLDT Broncos. And please send your condolences to them because the community, the hockey team, everybody involved with hockey in Canada is hurting for that team right now. And I would really appreciate that. You know, I love hockey. The game has been incredibly good to me. And, you know, I realize down in the South where a lot of our listeners are from, it's the same thing as college football to you guys or college basketball. It just means the world to us up here. So if you could do that, I would really appreciate that. Anyhow, back to the show tonight as we are talking about extraterrestrials with the ET connection with our Keith Andrews. It happens here the first Friday of every month. Keith is with us. Keith, hello.
Hey, how we doing?
Good, and we are joined by the preacher, and we got a caller from area code 501. Who are we speaking with tonight?
Sammy.
Hi, Sammy. How you doing?
I'm all right. I had a question, and I wanted to let you know I'm sending out thoughts and prayers of love and healing for your team.
Thank you.
But I wanted to ask Keith, I've had through my life a lot of missing time and a lot of knowledge that I can't explain, and yet I did terribly in school just like he did. And I was just curious if he had what he might have to say about that as far as any possible contact. I know I've got family members that I've noticed have experiences they don't know about.
Yeah, that's not surprising because it happens more often than you care to count, where you know the abductions and collections, if you will, take place through a bloodline, and it's because of the fact that they're tracking a lot of different things all at the same time. You know, and the fact that you already know in your heart what's been going on will inevitably make it easier to cope with. For what
I'm ready. I'm
they're
ready
actually,
for the truth. I'm ready to deal with it, but I don't understand the like totally wipe me out if it's even happening with me, because I'm ready to deal with my truth. I've had a knowledge of some of the deepest things since I could remember walking, and it's just that part's getting on my nerves. Don't know. I don't know why, and I just am curious. Maybe it's just in my head that I'm thinking something has happened. I don't know.
well, looking at that aspect of it, is it just in my imagination? It's a wonderful thought, and it is comforting for the first little while, until you start looking at the odds of that many events all being just your mind, your imagination. The best way I had it put to me by a psychiatrist was, if you're asking if you're losing your mind, the answer is no, because if you were losing your mind, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
That said, what I've found with a lot of them is people that think they're ready, may well in their own heart feel they are, but there may be something in the subquantum level of your cranial makeup that makes them leery about leaving it out in the open completely. The other part is that your subconscious will bury a lot of the information even if they leave it open, because depending on your background and your personal experiences on this planet, your mind may literally hide it from itself because it can't find
see, that's what I was thinking was happening, possibly because I know that history is there, that I've seen that happening with just the type of life I've had as a child. But at the same time, like when you explain things or you make comments to people on an answer that someone generally without any degrees would never have any knowledge, let alone be able to say the words, I get everything you're saying when you say it. I have that quantum, just all of this information in there that I get, that I understand, and I don't even know how I know it. So, I don't know. It's just...
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly that it can be very disconcerting. As I mentioned to our listeners before, it wasn't until just 2 years ago that I finally quit trying to convince my parents that I wasn't completely off my nut, because of the information I was picking up and I was able to relate. Right. So I certainly sympathize with what you're going through. I can also tell you, if you take a journal, like I was mentioning to Preacher there, if you put a pad by your bed and you start writing down these thoughts that you're having and these insights that come to light, then when you look back over them as they come up, you'll start to see you're actually remembering more than what you think. But because it's coming in bits and pieces, you forget about it because of the activities of the rest of your life. So by writing them down, you'll have a document that you can go back and go, holy mackerel, I was thinking.
As a child, I did that instinctively. I would write in my sleep in this journal, and my parents found it. My mother used to go through my stuff, and they took me to a doctor. And within 5 minutes, they put me in this hospital. And I had dreamt about the towers back then, and I was just a child, and I'm almost 50, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And as the decades have passed, all of this stuff came to be.
Yeah.
And that doctor took that from me, and ever since then, I've been like apprehensive about even attempting to go back there. Do you know what I mean?
I understand entirely where you're coming from. So I'll put it to you this way. Take your apprehension for what it is. You come by it honestly, but use that stubborn streak of yours that is so well developed and deliberately put the information down, because what you're doing is you're reclaiming your own head, and you'll get the hidden memories back.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and lots of love to you and Dave. And Preacher.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sammy, for calling on in. Let's get to some questions that are in the chat room right now on Spreaker. And this one came a while ago from Catherine, who is asking, Keith, what species live above skies and ships, but the planet is more like a red mountain area of Earth?
Well, that would be Martokians. They don't technically live there, they vacation there. And in answer to that neat little question, they come from Mars. They are greenish in color, but they're not short. But you've either got them or the other group that you might be looking at is from some areas in Mobius, which is Earth's planet sister planet on the other side of the sun. Okay. But that's where they're from. That's the two most likely that you're referring to. There are others that are, of similar configuration, but those are the two closest.
Joe is asking on Periscope, do most abductions happen in good weather or bad weather, or does it even matter?
It has no bearing. It happens on just about every weather system available. Heck, they'll pick people up in the middle of a tornado because they can compensate for it, and let's face it, people aren't paying much attention. They're a little more concerned about the wind volume or wind
they
speed.
picked me up in broad daylight, so
Yeah. Yeah, they're not exactly shy on occasion.
Not at all. Let's go through this. Keith, Dan wants to know if you know anything about these Zendras people are starting to study. They are some sort of spiritual portal that is created. A fog seems to come around, which opens up a gateway towards some other world or dimension where alien beings such as Antaral can come through and communicate with people on this side whom they have chosen to go into the Zendra.
Okay, well, two things. The Zendra isn't so much a race as a group, as it were, like a classification, if you will. And what you're looking at is localized, orchestrated wormholes. And what you're seeing with the fog is literally the reaction of the atmosphere on the higher vibratory rate. And they are from this dimension. They're not another dimensional being. They're just from a different planet. Or more to the point, a different location. And I don't mean different location on this planet. Sometimes they'll come in off of a planet. Sometimes they'll come in off of a ship. But you're talking about a physical portal that is being opened. And the fog, like I said, it's a reactive side of the atmosphere. Well, for lack of a better way of putting it, I believe it's because of the cooling of the interaction, of the atmospheric cooling that creates said fog. But again, they're simply trying. The reason they go after individuals is to get the message that they've got over to people that are more likely to do something with it than, shall we say, some of the better placed people from a Terran standpoint. Okay, that's the big
Can
issue.
you control what goes or what beings come out of a Zendra?
Can I control, or can anybody?
Anybody.
The people that are setting it up can. It's basically controlled from their end as far as what opens and who comes through. Okay. But as far as usually the people that come through that aren't coming in to kidnap, they're coming in, or abduct, they're coming in to talk. So usually the people that they come to visit don't actually get picked up. They usually get just simply a communication line, and then the individual in question goes back. That's the difference there.
Have you ever taken part in one?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're based. The neat part about it is that they're lower grade, they're a more focused version of the psychomantium. Okay, psychomantium is a whole different conversation, but I've used them because I think the best way to put it is it's kind of like like a literal holographic telephone, where they don't physically have to come through. They can if they set it up to do so, but it's more often than not a holographic interaction, I think, is the best way to put it. Hence the translation comes through a lot easier.
How do you start one of these Zendras? What's the process of doing that?
Well, we have to start with hyperdensification of the atmosphere. Then you go into a cross modulation on the triphasic side to bring the subquantum elements into configuration with the superquantum. And from there it gets complicated. By the way, we also have to generate one heck of a biofield in order to actually get the photoreactive I was going to say hydraulics, but no. It's a photoreactive hydrosphere that they use to transmit. And yes, I realize that probably sounded like Swahili.
All right, let's move on to the questions. Shar is asking, Keith, why do governments fake abductions, and has that ever come out in hypnosis?
Well, it's come out in hypnosis, and it's come out in public by many people. The reason they do it, quite frankly, is because if they're looking for somebody in particular, or if they're looking for, and of course, do understand something very critical here. This is my opinion. It doesn't necessarily refer to anything that Dave, SOR, Preacher, any of the affiliates. This is just my perspective on it. But governments have been using this technique for millennia to keep tabs on people while getting people to look the other direction at something else going on. So if you want to pull somebody out of, if you've got somebody that's being potentially problematic, or that the government may feel has information they're not voluntarily sharing, they may be using the abduction scenario to pull them out of the area to ask. And quite often, especially if they're somebody that is well connected in more than one government that's being taken, a government will pull them out in that fashion, get the information they need, and put them back. And everybody chalks it up to, oh, they were abducted, so ignore it. It's also a great way of getting some people to stop talking. Because if you scare them enough, and if they're edgy enough about the UFO phenomenon in the first place, being abducted can really throw you for a loop. But that's a couple of the reasons why they do it. But they've been doing it since civilization started. Make sense?
Totally makes sense. Preacher, what do you think about that?
Well, it's all a matter of destroying the messenger. These people are credible witnesses, and in a lot of cases they have, fairly impeccable, character. So in order for the government to silence them, they got to, do something to, taint their testimony a little bit. So you put some kind of slightly off-color label to them, and all of a sudden, well, yeah, they were pretty credible, except you got to put that shadow of doubt on them.
Exactly.
They've been doing that crap for, it's, like take Lonnie Zamora. As a credible UFO witness, how much better could you get? The man's testimony could literally have stood up in a court of law on any other subject, he could have been, called to testify in a capital murder case, and his testimony would have been considered, could have put somebody in the chair, or put him, and might have, for all we know. I don't know his record as a policeman, but I mean, this man's testimony would have held up in court as impeccable. But when it came to Lonnie Zamora saying he saw a craft land and there being, occupants that got out, did some work, and then left, his word isn't good enough. There's a dual standard when it comes to the UFO or any of the, cryptids, or anything that's just not, vanilla ice cream, bread and butter, white bread crap, as far as, experiencing reality.
Well, exactly. And I mean, let's face it, it's in the government, the governments around the world think this is in their best interest. Oddly enough, it actually is counterproductive.
No. Yeah. And, the whole thing is, once this blows out, once it becomes common knowledge that, yes, we've had this ET contact for decades, we've had access to this technology, saw these, basically ballistic missiles we send people into space haven't been necessary. That's going to open up a floodgate for, the survivors of the Challenger and the Columbia accidents. They're going to be irate knowing that their family members are gone, and there didn't need to be a reason.
Well, in all fairness, especially when we look at the Challenger, and don't get me wrong, I watched the thing. It was horrendous. I can only fathom what the families did. But with regards to that, yes, there were some mistakes made. But did mankind have to do the launch themselves and figure out that side of it? The answer is still yes, they did. Because if they didn't figure that out, much like nuclear power, they wouldn't be able to figure out the next steps, and be able to function in the case of complications once they're out there.
Oh, I agree, but I mean, that doesn't mean that the families aren't going to be upset.
Oh no.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be torqued off that this had to happen. That, I don't know, it just seems like we could have got there better. What I'm saying is, if we could get spaceborne without the use of hydrazine fuel and blowing ourselves up, or essentially riding, a bottle rocket into space, if we had anti-gravity at the time, then these family members, society at large, because I mean, that was traumatizing as an enthusiast to watch the Challenger explode. That's back when they still, I remember that. I was watching that, and I was so happy that day because I was off, and I was getting to see a shuttle launch. And,
oh, yeah,
go from
I remember
just jazzed up to, oh my God, did that just happen in a blink?
Oh yeah, like I mean, I only watched it on the television, but the shockwave that ran through it was just insane. But the issue of would it, did it have to go through it? The answer is it could have been done easier. But, it all boils down to something else I've been avoiding talking about for the last number of weeks, is if mankind would quit shooting at each other and work together to build the technology, they'd actually make much further headway.
Well, we understand that, and the what-ifs on that, unfortunately, society is way too political, way too violent to even try and profess those types of what-ifs, guys. I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer here in regards to it, but that's the reality of the situation. I'm going to get to another question here for you, Keith, in regards to a question from Catherine, who is asking, how many times, Keith, have you been offered to forget what has taken place to you?
How many times have I been offered?
How many times have the aliens asked to maybe remove those images from your head?
Oddly enough, never. At least, not to the best of my recollection. I'm sure somebody probably mentioned it in passing. But I've always been a firm believer, because of the amount of amnesia I had when I was growing up. Every time somebody is asked about, even humans asking, well, wouldn't it be nice to not know? I've got firsthand experience with total amnesia. And it's the one thing that I won't do. Even with some of the horrendous things I've been through, I won't shut them down because they are part of what makes me me. And knowing what I've been through, quite frankly, helps me not only cope with it, but helps me be able to assist others in understanding what they're going through. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, if I had the ability or if I had the opportunity of having my mind blanked, knowing what I know, I would turn them down flat anyway, because what most people don't realize is that even as an adult, the physical brain will rewire itself and pull that information back to the surface sooner or later anyway. And I've already gone through that kind of memory recovery, and trust me on this one, it is not fun. Because you get it back in bits and pieces.
All right, let's get to Bob's question. Hi, Bob. Hope your health is doing well, my friend. Uncle Bob, the great voice of introduction around Spaced Out Radio, battling some health problems right now. Bob, we love you. We're thinking of you. And Bob's question to you, Keith, is, he says, I'm currently in the middle of watching a documentary about how a lot of these plagues throughout history could have been related to E.T. craft sightings. What is your opinion on this?
Well, technically they could have been. Do I blame the ETs for them? No. But the moment you get an atmospheric disturbance, it can create all sorts of complications. But when you look at many of the plagues, you really have to understand that Mother Nature is really a far better orchestrator of taking care of the problems it's having than any and I mean literally non-planetary body can do. So much as there are similarities, there are ways you can see a correlation between them, and I certainly don't call it coincidence. But would I go so far as to say that there is a likelihood that they were caused by off-worlders? The answer is no. But there are some things that are certainly contributed to it. May have contributed to it. But exactly which ones, I'd have to really do a little bit of poking around, piece that one together.
Well, would you not expect them to want to get some kind of field data? They see this plague running through the planet, destroying 2/3 of the population of a continent. I mean, they would be remiss in their jobs as scientists not to be down there trying to gather some kind of data. Maybe they didn't cause them, but they had to want to explore.
They absolutely would have had their fingers, well, they did have their fingers deep in the bucket, pulling out samples, doing the, if you will, elevated abductions in order to get the data of the impact, both on the socioeconomic and on the evolutionary genetic level, never mind the subquantum impact on the neural net. You can bet your bottom dollar they were up to their eyeballs in it. It's just they weren't doing anything to stop it because it was a natural evolution of the planet. Okay, are some of the people involved in spotting the plagues when they were starting certainly had accelerated insight, whether it came from off-world or whether it came because they were born with the ability to see, is up to conjecture on a lot of different levels. But that's why the off-worlders wouldn't step in and stop it, is because it wasn't going to wipe out the planet. Yes, knocking out 2/3 of the population, little horrendous from mankind's standpoint, but not from a planetary standpoint.
All right, let's get to another question here. This one coming from Tessa. Could aliens represent themselves as the devil or lower-level demons?
Well, technically the answer would be yes, they could. The problem isn't so much that they represented themselves that way, so much as mankind interpreted the appearance of them through their own ignorance of what they were looking at as the devil or lower grade and lower level demons. It's not so much that the off-worlders or the aliens were so negative inclined.
I was wondering when his Skype was going to give up there. It was dying there.
The individual fills in the blank.
And there's Keith. He's back. You were out for about 6-7 seconds there, buddy.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
I have no idea what was missed.
All right, not a big deal, not a big deal at all. When it comes to abductions, you know, Keith, in your experience, do a lot of the malevolent and abductions, do they happen more to men, more to women, or is it a combination of equality there?
It really is a flip of the coin which one gets it. You know, it's not... The difference is in the makeup of the individual. Women, on the whole, are going to see things as a more benevolent side or with a little bit more understanding. Men, on the whole, when you take away their power to do something, get extremely agitated, and subsequently it becomes a negative experience in their interpretation, no matter how peaceable it was. You know, you take most men, if you tie them down or you immobilize them, the first thing they do is go into high alert and high aggression. Okay, women have a much higher propensity to go, well, let's see what happens. And yes, I'm going to worry about it, but I'm not going to get aggressively violent about it unless they're doing something that is really complicated. And by the way, this does not make men better or worse than women or vice versa. It's just a difference in the different genders' general reactions. But it's not more of one or the other in the way that you're inferring, or that you seem to be inferring.
Well, you know what? I think it's going to be an interesting scenario to watch as you know, I think it starts to come out more. The more publicity that this whole UFO phenomena takes in the mainstream media, eventually it is going to come down, Preacher, and I'm sure you'll agree, to how many people are getting abducted. When is that happening? How is it happening?
And of course, the all-important why.
Yeah, exactly. The why. I just, you know, with my own, I guess we'll call it without you know, giving it the benefit of the doubt, my own experience was apparently not bad. I don't know what the end result will be. If I ever disappear, I guess I ended up as human McNuggets on an alien spaceship. But for the time being, I don't have, you know, anything bad about my own, other than I woke up sore. But, you know, from my standpoint, every conceivable thing was done, other than numbing my nose, which would have probably caused, you know, more damage than having at least let me know there was something there so I didn't cause further damage. The whole idea, I think, with abduction period is it's a violation. We humans don't live as a collective, and I think maybe some of these off-worlders who do live in collectives, where if you do one thing to one member of their, you know, species, you do it to all, and maybe that's part of the reason they don't see it as quite the same violation as we do. We don't, as individuals, you know, we don't have a common consciousness to help us explain what just happened.
Well, that is certainly part of the problem. Of course, the other part is scientists are doing exactly the same thing to other animals on this planet. And don't get me wrong, I'm not in favor of being abducted. I've been there, done that. No fun. But mankind is doing it to other lesser races on Earth, and mankind understandably doesn't like it being done to them. Is really what it boils down to. And, in all fairness, I agree with people in general. Being abducted is not a fun thing.
Well, we really don't have a moral leg to stand on because as a field biologist, there were some things I didn't have to do all of them, but there was still a few things I found distasteful. Just interrupting breeding cycles or, just interfering with the natural order, what these creatures are doing in their life to make what, to most people would be just kind of stupid observations to make a tick mark on a clipboard. So, we do it to those creatures that we feel are, like you said, we do it to people that are things that we think are lower down the ladder than we are. So when it's our turn, I guess we can't really complain.
No, but I do understand the complaint. And I'm right up there with everybody going, I don't like the idea. I just happen to be fortunate enough to have graduated from being abducted and experimented on to actually interacting with them. I call it fortunate. It does play its own havoc. Completely screws with your understanding of what most people call normal life. And you and I have had some interesting conversations about that.
Guys, we only got time for a couple more questions here, and Kevin is asking, Keith, what are your thoughts on the Dulce underground base in New Mexico with aliens, humans being used for experiments, etc.?
Well, in all fairness, number one, it's happening. Number two, in a sense, it's kind of fair considering humans are doing the same thing to aliens that they've managed to get. It's kind of a swap-off. And, again, it really boils down to trying to figure out how each other are thinking and communicating, but using some pretty barbaric methods of doing it. It's sort of one of these things that falls into the category of very distasteful, but it's understandable how it's gone down that road. Because mankind is trying to figure things out. And, of course, because humans don't actually, and, Eric here alluded to it, because humans don't think in a static pattern, the off-worlders are having one heck of a time trying to find a baseline to gauge human reaction to figure out how they're going to fit into the Galactic Consortium in the first place.
Yeah, we're such a wide range. You've got the extremely xenophobic that if you're not just like from their immediate tribe or immediately a family, they go berserk to the people that wouldn't care if you were purple, had pseudopodia, and, ate garbage. There's just such a spectrum, a wide spectrum of how we deal with things.
So they're trying, heck, Eric, you keep trying to find a balance point for it. I do, in my way, look for a balance point between how people are going to react. And I'll tell you, the algorithm is insane. It's such a twisted outlook. And
there's too many variables.
Yeah.
There's there's me. I don't feel like I'm xenophobic at all.
Well, you deal with me well enough, so.
Well, I've got, but all joking aside, I can't conceive, if something's not trying to eat me, dissolve me in a vat of acid, or cause bodily harm to me, I'm not, I'm more about what something is trying to do or its behaviors toward me than what it looks like. I just can't think of anything out there so far out that, yes, I would probably be startled but it wouldn't be, oh my God, run from the hills type of reaction. I can't, but that's based on behavior.
Yeah. And, I mean, understandably, even if you're not a xenophobe, if somebody, well, it doesn't matter what they look like, if they pull a gun on you, or some facsimile thereof, it's not a good way to say hello.
Right.
You know?
But how many cultures are out there in the universe, showing your weapon or a weapon to somebody is like showing somebody your open hands?
There are a couple.
I show you my knife, which means my knife is not hidden. You would see that as from an Earth person, you're like, this dude just whipped a knife out on me.
Yeah. And there are protocols to that, especially, like, if you take a look at Srazazian social levels, and many other races, in all fairness, they present their weapon side first. Like, for instance, if they're taking out a mace, they'll hold it out with both hands, but they'll hold it out sideways, right, to say, this, just like you said, I'm not hiding the weapon, here it is, right? Now, so I mean, there's so many differences in culture that go that route. And then there's people like with humans where you pull a weapon to show them the weapon and they automatically think you're challenging them to a fight and they shoot first.
Gentlemen,
this is why the hybridization program came in.
Gentlemen, we got to get to the thought of the day, so hold on. Put your seatbelts on. Here we go. Thought of the Day happens every night at this time, where during the day I ask a question on my Facebook page, travels over to Twitter, and we give your answers to what the Thought of the Day is. So today's Thought of the Day is, if you're an ET abductee, what have you learned from your contact experience? So we're going to read some of the responses that we got. You guys ready?
Sure.
Excellent.
Yes.
Let's start off with Eric. He says, nonlinear science has never been touched after Einstein's spooky action at a distance discovery. Quantum entanglement should be vigorously studied to understand this part of evolution in the mind. What do you think, Preacher?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was something that didn't fit into Albert Einstein's mechanics, and that's why he called it spooky action at a distance. He didn't like it. I think Niels Bohr, I think some of the other physicists were more willing to accept it, like Niels Bohr and Schrödinger, and to them it opened up more possibilities. To Albert Einstein, it was unorthodox. It didn't have a mathematics to it, and I think that bothered him.
Keith, your thoughts?
Well, I absolutely agree. The funny part about it was the reason it didn't add up is because, well, simply put, he was using the wrong mathematics. But should it be looked into and studied and the whole 9 yards? Without a shadow of a doubt, the answer is yes. Because that is where it's by studying that which we don't understand that people get ahead. They move into a different view. If people, the moment people stop asking questions, the civilization dies.
Let's move on here. Catherine says, "Run to the hills, run for your lives." She's quoting Iron Maiden there. You can never go wrong with quoting Iron Maiden, I will tell you that, Catherine. Thank you. Serena jumps in saying, "I learned how to stop the negative contact and increase the positive." JR says, "I learned the truth is, unless you let it go, unless you forgive yourself, unless you forgive the situation, unless you realize that the situation is over, you cannot move forward. I've also learned now that while those who speak about one's miseries usually hurt, those who keep silent hurt more." How true is that, Keith?
Way more true than you might think. And this is why it's so important that, people reach out to people that are open-minded, like yourself, like Preacher, and talk about it, because just even just hearing yourself speak about it relieves a lot of that pressure if you're talking to somebody that's not going to tell you you're nuts. But it is extremely necessary to bring it out in the open.
Earlier on, as we started this hour, it was I made an announcement just about that the Humboldt Broncos hockey team that had a tragic accident in Nipawin, Saskatchewan, earlier today, and the RCMP in Nipawin have actually now confirmed that 14 people from the bus have died. There are 14 injured as well, 3 critically in hospital right now. So thoughts and prayers, if you have the opportunity on social media to wish the Humboldt Broncos a thought and a prayer, we would appreciate that. Hockey is a very, very loving community in Canada and around the world, and we would appreciate if you did that. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. God, I hate that, but hockey is just so damn important to me. It really is. It's been a good game to me. So let's move on here. Donna says, they are very evolved mentally and, dare I say, spiritually. Kim jumps in and says, they don't appear to be taking anyone actually to keep them, much to my dismay. They have teaching abilities. Huh. I guess Kimberly just doesn't want to stay on old planet Earth anymore. Scott says...
She had somebody brought back.
Yeah, Scott says... How to fold space with certain equipment, materials used for the equipment in what order and layer of depth, the math needed. I was also shown that we are immortal spiritual beings, and I know that what is coming. That sounds a little far out there, but do you believe that, Keith?
That we are immortal beings?
Souls.
Essentially correct. For lack of a better way of putting it, I mean, immortal is a little overstated. But the soul lives a lot longer than the human body. Basically, the human body boils down to a vehicle that you're using for a time. And when it wears out, you go and get another one.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the esoteric stuff I've been reading suggests that there is that spark of the divine, which is the spirit, and the soul is more or less the clothing that the spirit wears as it evolves. That the soul isn't really a permanent structure, but we do pick up, the spirit part picks up pieces from the soul that it finds useful and helps it evolve. But when it's done, the soul is kind of this discarded garment.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, you're correct, although the spirit isn't the smallest part, but they basically have the right idea.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on here, guys, because we've got a few more before we wrap this up in a couple of minutes here. Art says, they are keeping the fetuses they make from us as cattle embryos to go. Sounds a little confusing there. Bobby jumps in. I've learned heaps how powerful I am when a negative encounter happened and how I'm still in my mind can alter my reality and so much more. Dale, you need a hyphen in between the dot and the lay. That there's so little humanity really knows, so much more that we need to learn. And Keith, you've talked numerous times about that.
Absolutely. I certainly am not going to argue that point. I'd be kind of arguing on the same side.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where the more we know, if you keep in mind, the more you know, the less you know. And that you know just enough to know you don't know enough, you'll keep learning. Hence why Eric's in the mess he's in, looking at science going, wait a minute, it doesn't explain everything that I'm now seeing.
Yeah. There's not enough answers. I'll always have questions. But what if?
Yep. But isn't it a wonderful experience when you go, yes, what if, and then you find the answer?
All right, I got to cut it there, guys, because I want to get in a couple more before we have to say goodnight to both of you. Kevin says, they gave me an upgrade, put something in my ears that has cleared out a lot of the bad goo. My consciousness is enhanced. I've also learned that my buddy Radar has a wicked sense of humor. The experience was so enlightening, my feelings for them has only intensified. I would say that is a good experience. Debbie from Verdun, British Columbia, well, I guess she just hasn't had a good time. She says, they will hunt you down if you remove anything they may insert in your body. They will go after children before puberty. They will show up when telepathically asked, and the grays are bad news, usually come in threes. They can control the environment so others can't see them and do communicate telepathically. Very controlling to say the least, but very much advanced. Puts an eerie end to this topic tonight. Preacher, thanks for hopping in, man.
Hey, thanks for having me come on.
No problem. R. Keith Andrews, we will talk to you next on Friday, May 4th. Good to have you back on the show for the ET Connection, my friend.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for joining us there, Eric. It was a lot of fun.
You guys hold on.
Always a pleasure.
You guys hold on. I'm going to wrap this thing up. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for Ron Bumblefoot Thal. A great week indeed. Tomorrow night on the program, Joe Roop is in for Spaced Out Saturdays. Sundays, we're going to run a network replay. So I would appreciate you coming on in and joining me in the chat room as well. I'll be back on Monday. Let's see, who's Monday? Butch Witkowski. Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong. Not Butch Witkowski. Alan Wright talking mediumship and healing. We will have some fun with Alan on Monday night right here on the show. Want to say a big thank you to everybody listening at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody playing along at Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio, in the Veterans Club, the SOR Space Travelers on Facebook. Everybody on Periscope, thank you so much for tuning in. And everybody over on Spreaker, you guys were wonderful tonight. Thank you so much for having fun with me. And all week long, you guys do it so well, sharing our shows, sharing our posts, making us feel bigger and better every day, because together, my friends, we own the night. I'll talk to you on Monday. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good weekend, everybody. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. Good night.